just want to share with everyone, this is actually a huge honor and a privilege to be a part of this webinar, and also to be partnering, getting an opportunity to partner with Ram to deliver on this face-to-face program that I think Coacharya is starting after a very long time. I think after a break of about 4 years. I think pre-COVID, I think this used to be a norm. But now, after 4 years, we are again getting back to this format because there seems to be a good demand for this, and people are wanting face-to-face programs more, have been wanting face-to-face programs more than online programs for a long time. And it gives us a huge opportunity for us to connect with the people and be in the same space. So not only are we focusing on spiritual intelligence and systemic coaching, it's a combination of spiritual intelligence, systemic coaching, and ontology that we bring in this format. And I have known Ram both as a coach, mentor, trainer, and he's the person I went to for my coach development, my coach training many years ago. And it's a huge privilege to actually be by his side, to be delivering this program. And I just wanted to ask Ram that I know you for some time, and you have been on this spiritual journey for a long time. And how is spirituality and spiritual intelligence kind of connected? Would you like to kind of start with that?
Yeah, sure. First of all, the clarification is, for many people, the confusion seems to be, and which is why there is a lot of hesitation in terms of calling any programs as spirituality, is because spirituality seems to be associated with religion. In fact, there couldn't be two more opposite things in existence as religion and spirituality. In my experience, religion as an organized religion is something which controls, which is manipulative, which is based on greed and fear. It rules with greed and fear. Whereas spirituality, which was probably the underlying philosophy with which those who originally propagated the religion, they started with, which was about freedom, which was about liberation. In Indian religion, you might call it the moksha. In another religion, you might call it the higher spirit, or whatever that you want to call it. But over a period of time, unfortunately, that whole concept of spirituality, the whole concept of freedom, the whole concept of liberation has been taken over by clergy. It has been taken over by people who manipulate in the name of religion, fake gurus, and so on and so forth. So what we have landed up is in darkness as far as religion is concerned. So one of the things I hate being called by, when people call me as a guru and they send me Guru Purnima wishes and so on, is the word guru means moving from darkness to light. But the people who are actually gurus, they are still in darkness. They have not seen any light at all. At least all the gurus that I have experienced in my life. So I think it'd be an insult to certainly call me a guru. If somebody else likes to be insulted by being called guru, that's fine. So coming back to the question that Dreyvan is asking, yeah, what is spiritual intelligence as related to spirituality in a sense? Yeah, both of them are words having the same commonality in some senses. I'll put it this way. If, based on all experiences that I've had in recent years, there has been a malaise of what you might call as mental unwellness, for want of a better word. And it could be related to loneliness, it could be related to discontent, it could be related to depression. At one point in time, this was all related to old age. People who are old, isolated, and feeling not so well, etc. They were the people who were experiencing. But today, in countries where these things are measured pretty often, today we find 50% of all adult population is affected. And unfortunately, far more dangerously, people below the age of 25, even from the age of about 15, seem to be affected. In fact, we have had people like Dr. Varun Soni, Professor Varun Soni, who's the head of religious affairs in the University of California in Los Angeles. He has about 50,000 students in that campus. And he said one of the biggest problems that they face is, in a sense, people with suicidal tendencies. It's about 10%, and the more number of people commissioners, therapists, counselors, etc. The numbers keep growing. So we were talking about, and we are still talking about in terms of introducing coaching as an element to do that. And what we want to discuss today is why coaching is probably a better option, a preferred alternative to therapy and counseling and stuff like that. And as a practical example, over a period of time, I've been meeting more and more people who have wealth, even at the age of about 30, 35. They have amassed, some of them, millions of dollars. And they are in positions of power. Some of them are startup founders, some of them are in high executive positions, and they are desperately unhappy. Now, these people, they don't like what they're doing. They are discontent, they are dissatisfied. At the same time, they're not quite sure what is going to make them happy. And so the simple answer is there's a lot of stuff going on there, hype about you have to find a purpose in life. So it's much easier said than done. How do you find purpose in life? How do you find meaning in life? How do you find that particular goal that you want to achieve, which is going to make you happy, content, joyful? And that is a core of what spiritual intelligence is. And I worked with some of them. And we have a process actually in Coacharya, which as a part of this particular program, we are going to introduce in a brief form called the Create Your Future, in terms of trying to figure out what is it that would sort of create a purpose for you in multiple ways, in the conscious sense and unconscious sense and so on. So many of these things are combined together in the whole definition of what one might call as spiritual intelligence. It's that part of us, the intelligence, which is beyond the emotional and the cognitive aspects of it, where something more that happens at the being, and which is what we are going to discuss as the ontological aspect of it. Dreyvan will cover more of it and we'll come back to it. And it is surprising, actually, perhaps not surprising, that even ICF is now on the bandwagon of spiritual intelligence, because they have something called the Thought Leadership Group, where they have recently started publishing a lot on spiritual intelligence. We have been doing this for the last about 5 years in some form or another. And I'm very happy that more people are getting onto this bandwagon. So before I hand over to Dreyvan in terms of ontology, there may have been some of you who attended International Coaching Week conversation that I probably had with Dana Zohar. She is considered to be one of the foremost authorities on the subject of spiritual intelligence. And she has defined a number of factors, I think about 12 factors. But amongst the most important of them is, first of all, self-awareness. Are we aware about what our blind spots are? Are we aware about where we really are, in a sense, and where we wish to go? Do we have humility? Are we compassionate? Are we treating other people as equal? And strangely, she also adds a few attributes, like people who ask a lot of the why question. Why is this happening? And also the ability to reframe what is happening to them, knowing fully well that what we perceive is not necessarily what is real. And so what is being interfered with through our limiting beliefs and so on, is it possible for us to reframe those? So all these things coming together in a holistic fashion is what she terms as spiritual intelligence. And there may be a lot of people who consider themselves experts in psychology and neurosciences who may sort of say, who's Dana Zohar? What does she know about it? Actually, she's a professor and a doctor in the field of philosophy, as well as in, I think, physics. She's a scientist philosopher. And she's also the person who helped a company called Hair in China, which was an unknown company about 10 to 12 years ago. And they credit the CEO of that company, the founder of that company credits pretty much everything that they have been able to do to Dana Sohar. And today they own General Electric Appliances, who used to be the market leader. And with here, I forget the name of the particular philosophy in Chinese, it's Ren something something. And they say that that is really what made them who they are. And Dana has written a book called, I think it's called The Zero Distance, if I'm not mistaken, something called Quantum Management, Zero Distance. Essentially what she is saying there is, she's actually a physicist, she trained in quantum science. And she says, it's all about quantum, it's about the entanglement, it's about reducing the distance between people. So when you become zero distance with others, when you really become part of the other person, then you become whole, then you become spiritual. So in a very, very simple way, if you want to talk about spiritual intelligence, it's about being able to recognize that we are all energy beings. We are encased in matter, but we are energy beings. And the last thing I would like to say is, this was said in the Upanishads 5,000 years ago, or maybe more. The Isavasya Upanishad starts with this particular sentence, Isavasyam idam sarvam in Sanskrit. It means that everything that exists as matter is energy. And it took 5,000 years for Einstein to be able to sort of enshrine it in a way in science till people could understand it. And when I blog about chakras, when I talk about chakras, there are many, I don't want to use bad words, but I would call them absolute idiots, who ask me, oh, it's not proven. You can't see energy. So how can you talk about chakras? I would like to ask any of those such people, if they are in this group, or if you meet them, ask them, do you understand anything about the theory of relativity? Professor Eddington famously said there are only 6 people in the whole world who understand. He actually said 3 people. He said, myself, Einstein, and David Bohm, but only 3 people who understand the theory of relativity. The rest of them don't even understand that, but they talk as if they know everything about it. But nobody would want to say anything against the theory of relativity because you would look like a fool, which you are in fact. We all need to admit that. So the same thing applies to energy. So if anybody next asks, why do you believe in energy? Why do you believe you're an energy being? You can ask them, why do you believe in the theory of relativity? Because there are a zillion applications which are today based on theory of relativity, which actually work. And therefore, even it's still a theory, believe you me. If you don't know that, it has not been there's no proven evidence of the theory of relativity. It's still a theory. But in spite of that, there are literally millions of applications arising out of theory of relativity, including lasers and whatever, medical equipment and so on and so forth. The same way, there are 6 billion people who are operating in this world, or 8 billion people today, who are all basically energy beings. Okay. Somebody raised their hands, so we will certainly answer your question once you put it down there. So, Dreyvan, if you would like
before you hand over, is there a way to actually make spiritual intelligence accessible to a layman with a very simple kind of a 1 or 2 line definition or 1 or 2 line explanation in a very layman? Because how is it different from emotional intelligence and EQ and IQ? There is an SQ nowadays. So,
yeah, the simplest way that I know of is, I mean, you could say meditation, and then people would say, oh, no, I find it very difficult to meditate. But I work literally with thousands of people. And whatever you are experiencing at this point in time, I'm quite happy, not in today's session, but if there is sufficient interest and sufficient number of you come up and tell us that we would like to have one more webinar next month around the 2nd Wednesday, which is when we conduct, I'll do a demo on that. And this is actually a healing exercise in spiritual intelligence, which is about experiencing what happens in your body as a physical energy experience. So for example, if you're feeling terribly invalidated, you're feeling very angry, instead of thinking about it, instead of calling it anger as an emotion, I work with people. Even if you don't know a damn thing about it, it takes 2 minutes for me to explain to them. Just close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, go into yourself, and just experience the situation which is causing you this particular trauma or feeling. Don't label it. And it's for many people, it takes a while because they have never tried it before. Once you start experiencing it, it'll fall somewhere, maybe in your chest, maybe in your navel, maybe deep down, depending upon what kind of emotions that you have. And it takes me about 20 minutes work with such people and to cure traumas that they have carried. Believe you me, I'm not bluffing, I'm not joking. And I can bring you people who will evidence to that. I've been carrying grief, guilt, anger, etc. for 20 years and going to therapists regularly. Now, is it spiritual intelligence? To me, it is because of two things. One is the first thing that we all receive based on any experience that we have, the meta experience, the purest experience, is through our sensors, the 5 sensory elements. So you might see, you might hear, you might taste, smell, or feel, but all of it is really in the body. And they are absorbed by the cells in the body. And it comes into, from the sensory perceptors, which are located at different parts of the brain and also in the body, they come into the limbic brain, to 2 parts of the brain, hypothalamus and hippocampus. The hippocampus already has a lot of memory base. It's like an AI, massive AI source. It compares it with that and says, hey, this what you're experiencing is related to this that you experienced earlier. And this is the kind of emotion that you felt. And Dreyvan would later talk about amygdala hijack. A part of the hypothalamus below that is called the amygdala that expands as its experiences felt, and it understands what it is, and then it conveys it to the prefrontal cortex where the thoughts take over. So when you have emotions, they are the first level corrupted information from the metadata of sensory perceptions. And when you have thoughts, they are the secondary corrupted or tertiary corrupted data that are being received. So if you really want to access the data, if you want to access the energy, you really have to feel within your body. So if you want to have a practical experience, that's the only way. That's the simplest way. And that is what you do in Vipassana. That is what you do in any serious meditation like Zen and so on and so forth. And pretty much there may be some of you who are with Cindy and I in the cohort that we are currently running. And we'll obviously be doing this kind of stuff in the program that we are going to run. Every single program that I do, I offer people, would you like to learn to meditate? So before the class starts, for about half an hour, this is what we spend doing, meditating. And then people actually feel what their energy is. And then they become spiritually intelligent. Because once you have that ability to feel the energy, you don't lose it. Once you've got it, you keep it forever. Yeah, everyone. So we relate to ontology. Yeah.
In a way, you're saying, Ram, that it is a way to access inner peace despite external circumstances and kind of the ability to remain there. Is that something on those lines?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't want to go too much into peace and calmness and all that stuff. Okay. So even after having practiced meditation for now probably about 50 plus years, it's not all the time that I'm calm and peace. I also lose my shirt. I feel frustrated. So, but what it does is you have these sinusoidal waves, as it were, the way that your mind responds to events. And that is caused by the sensory perceptors, the amygdala, and the frontal cortex. But once you practice this, it takes you probably at the most a minute.
Yeah.
A couple of deep breaths and hold them, whatever it is, and then inhale, hold, exhale, hold a few times. You find it flattens out. Whereas otherwise, the same thing used to sort of be there for weeks together and sometimes come up at oddest moments and bother you. So you may not be always at peace, That only happens when you are dead, because you're a flatliner. Otherwise, the brain keeps moving. You can be disengaged. You can say that you are disengaged, but still you get engaged at points in time. And there are people who talk about, I know some of you may be familiar with this word called sunya meditation. They say it brings you silence. Or you have no thoughts. So people who are taught that, I just ask them the simple question. If you did that sunya meditation, how do you remember what you went through? It's absolute BS to say that there's sunya meditation. The brain doesn't stop thinking, but you are disengaging from the thinking. That's what happens when you do something like Vipassana. After the 7th or the 8th day, suddenly you are in a space where you go beyond your mind and body. And those kind of experiences, of course, we are not going to go to a 10-day silent retreat. Here we are going to do a 3-day program, which is going to qualify you for the ICF credentials. But within that, you will at least learn the basics of how to reach within yourself to find that space, which is the safest space in existence.
Yes. Yes, and that's where I felt that, there was quite a bit of an overlap between spiritual intelligence and ontology. And ontology, if I may continue from there and take what ontology is about. Ontology, I've been running this course now for almost 5 years, and a lot of participants who have come over here without knowing a word about what ontology is. Oftentimes, they're very, very intimidated by the word, and they call me up before the course starts and say, "Hey, Dreyvan, I don't know anything about ontology. Do I need to kind of read up and read some books and gen myself up?" And it's just like how Ram was saying, you don't need to. You really don't need to know anything about ontology, because ontology is simply the study of being and existence. And coaching is a space where we are offering ourselves as a being to others, the clients who come to us. And so therefore, ontology fits in very beautifully, very, very beautifully in the space of coach training and becoming a coach. Because what you're doing in an ontological process whilst we're going through the coach training program is to really get deep into our self-awareness about ourselves and really trying to understand our limitations, our beliefs, the model that we work out of, and all of that. And so all of that gets really examined during this journey whilst becoming a coach, because fundamentally I think that we offer ourselves as containers to others. So what is the quality of that container that you're offering to others? I mean, that's very, very important for us to understand. What is the nature of that container? And that's what we really get into, along with kind of studying about models and frameworks and tools, and trying to understand what are powerful questions, and what should we be asking in the beginning of the session, what should we be asking at the end of the session. All of that is great. But what we are trying to do through this process of combining spiritual intelligence, ontology, systemic coaching, is to enable coaches to become aware of the quality of the space that they are offering, and to kind of imbibe the mindset of that of a coach before even getting into really memorizing and knowing and information-based kind of, a learning process. So I just take a moment, Ram, if I can share a slide.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that fundamentally what we are trying to do, and what I have realized, because I do get a lot of participants who come from different schools for the advanced course, after having gone through their foundation with other institutions. I think one of the things that a lot of other organizations focus on during coach training is to focus on enabling participants to get models, tools, frameworks. Even now, some of the participants who have come to me in the foundation course, which is going on for me, some of them right up front, they say, "Dreyvan, can you give us a question bank? Can you give us a question bank for the markers, and so that we know what kind of questions to ask?" And that's essentially the first approach. It's an information-based approach where you try to do things until you start having your credentials, and then subsequently, when you have your credentials, you start feeling like that I am a coach. The being comes much later. But what we do at Coacharya, which my personal experience with Ram, and I remember having gone through Ram's course like 5 or 6 years ago, and I used to call him Mr. Miyagi, because the way he taught us then was exactly the second model over here, wherein we never touched upon competencies and markers in detail till pretty late in the course. We were basically understanding the essence of who a coach is when they offer themselves to others, to their clients. And that's the essence of what Coacharya, how Coacharya is different from the other organizations that are offering coach training programs, because this is more a phenomena-based approach. That means you're trying to understand the phenomena of the coaching process itself. And once you start getting and imbibing the energy, the mindset, the way the client, the way the coach thinks and it offers the space, that's when the doing part automatically gets you to the having kind of a, this is just basically inversing the circle over here. If you see a typical journey in doing to have to be, looks like this. Intensely studying coaching techniques, attending workshops, practicing coaching as much as possible, acquiring information and practice, etc., etc. And then you accumulate coaching hours and testimonials and get a credential. And subsequently, you become confident about, okay, now I think I'm qualified. The world tells me that I am a good coach. This is basically backed by external validation. But this is how a lot of institutes offer their coach training journey. What we are trying to do in Coacharya is a little different. We are trying to go about it this way. That means we are kind of encouraging participants right from the word go to get into a lot of deep reflection in terms of their personal values. What are their strengths? And what kind of a coach do they want to become? There's a connection that we are trying to help them make with this space of coaching. And once you find that connection, it becomes easier for us to actually put in the work and then seek mentorship and gradually build your coaching experience and find yourself creating genuine transformation for your clients, because your actions are aligned with the values with which you are which you have found and which you have figured out in the initial process of reflection and the ontological and the spiritual intelligence kind of an approach that we take you through. So eventually having a credential comes automatically when you are starting off from the being domain. That's essentially what I think Coacharya does very differently from other organizations. And this is what I wanted to actually share and let people know, that the reason why spiritual intelligence and ontology plays quite an important role in the development of a coach. And let me just stop the sharing over here. Yeah. So what do we do? Like, I understand that human beings firstly operate out of a lot of constraints. Are we as coaches, when we get into the coach training journey, are we aware of these constraints? Standard default constraints. People do not know that, like, for example, Ram mentioned in the beginning that something like an amygdala hijack happens to all of us. Something like we operate out of our worldviews. I often like to tell this to, I use this example in my sessions about what is a worldview. Like, I like to say that, when a person is born, like they're born in a spoon of water. If you were to actually catch a spoon and put some water in it, it would seem like as if there is a human being who's born inside of the spoon of water, swimming around in that spoon of water. And as the years go by, the spoon of water becomes a cup of water, and then the cup of water becomes a pool of water, and the pool of water then becomes a lake, and then the lake becomes an ocean. Now, what happens is every single drop of water that exists inside that ocean is your reality, is your truth. So if someone, in some creature, some human being were to come from outside of that ocean and tell you that, hey, this is also possible. Like, for example, if you're that human being or equivalent of a fish swimming inside that ocean full of water, and if a bird were to come and say, hey, even flying is a possibility, it would be impossible for you to actually fathom that flying is a possibility inside of that ocean, because every single drop of water that exists inside of that ocean is your truth, and nothing outside that ocean can exist for you. But that is the sense of what a worldview is. And we all operate out of such worldviews, and we can very rarely connect with possibilities that exist outside of that ocean. So if you are the Pacific Ocean, you can't even actually connect with someone from the Atlantic Ocean or the Indian Ocean, because you are so used to every drop of water being your truth. in the Pacific Ocean, then it doesn't make it possible for you to actually be an opening to other possibilities. So these are the kind of limitations that we dig very, very deep into. I'm trying to kind of cover a distinction over here of worldview in a very laymanish way, but we go really into depth of who am I, who are we as human beings. We also look at every single pillar which Carl Rogers talks about, that is congruence, unconditional positive regard, empathy. We do a full-blown deep dive into each of these pillars from an ontological framework. Like, for example, most people know unconditional positive regard as a definition. What is unconditional positive regard? I oftentimes ask my participants, if you know what is unconditional positive regard, and tomorrow I put someone in front of you as a client who is debauched, you know, who's not a person you can connect with, like, for example, a murderer or somebody who's doing harm to society, can you coach that person? And a lot of participants go like, no, we can't, Dreyvan. We can't be coaching this person. So if you realize where are you operating from, if you understand unconditional positive regard, it is just an intellectual understanding of unconditional positive regard, or can you embody unconditional positive regard and operate from there? There's a big difference between these two spaces, between these two planes. What we try to do during these courses is to bridge that gap, and literally, like what Ram was saying, zero. What was that you said? Dana talks about that book, the name of that book, Zero Distance. Like really reducing the distance between you and the other person whom you're trying to coach, because you see that actually we all come from the same space. Everything is just everything that we are is just acquired, and you're able to see past all of that. So getting these distinctions of unconditional positive regard, congruence, empathy, compassion, really trying to get what is the human design, what are the constraints that we function out of, so that you can be accommodative of other human beings who are similarly functioning out of those constraints. All of that becomes possible. And slowly what happens is when you go through an ontological coach training journey combined with spiritual intelligence, you are just becoming far more expanded as a space holder when you offer yourself as a coach to your clients.
Yeah, Dreyvan, there are a few questions I just like to take now. Before that, yeah, I just want to say hi to Andrew here and Ronnie, people I haven't met for a while. And let's take it from there to a couple of questions that have been asked. One is, Sai asks, is distance not required for detachment? No, absolutely not. That's a lazy way of trying to detach. You can be very, very close. And let's say, take a very personal example. We have been married for 50 years, and I can be quite disengaged with whatever is going on. I can be very disengaged with my own life. And I'm not saying it as a joke, but the fact is, if at this point in time, as I'm talking to you, if my breath were to stop, that is fine. That is disengagement. It's something that you learn to practice. It's got nothing to do with distance. Time and space are not equations out here. So, yeah, it is very easy to disengage when you are separated, right? Or you try to be disengaged. But can you really be disengaged? Supposing you have a child, another part of the world, like we have grandchildren and children there in the United States, and 12 hours difference with LA. Does it mean automatically we get disengaged? No. So anyway, I can go on and on for it, but I don't want to go far too much into it. But the other point is, I don't know, ethical relativism. I don't even understand what the word is. But anyway, Dreyvan, did you use a word called ethical relativism?
I didn't.
Anyway, yeah, Sai is talking about that. You were talking about ethical relativism. I don't know what it is, but if you can explain it to me in simple language that I can understand, I can probably answer that. Okay. So anyway, what you said in a sense is true. We seem to require someone from outside the country to be able to tell us what spirituality is, because we are so focused upon religion. That's why I brought up the name of Andrew, Kelly, Ramcharan. They are people who've been meditators for a large part of their life, and they have been conducting programs on spirituality. And I'm sure Andrew would be able to give you a reference in Albuquerque in New Mexico. And in fact, Kelly does something on using horses, equine coaching, she calls it. In fact, I've been really very, very keen to go there. We haven't been able to make it so far. One of these days we will, and probably do a retreat with them. So very simple answer to what Indu you asked is this. I think you have to really become an atheist first to understand what spirituality is. It may seem like a contradiction in terms. The whole problem is that we have this image of God as something, where that God rests within us, that superior power is within us. And so when we start looking at something, I'm not just talking about idol worship or anything, but it can be even abstract, it can become the same. So if you, for instance, disengage from that concept and then start looking at yourself as an energy being and being connected with that, and then you will find that truly God is everywhere. That thing that you call about as God is everywhere. So I love going to temples. I feel the energy there. I don't go there for the idols. I go for the energy. So religion and spirituality then come together. But unfortunately, we seem to have separated these. I mean, this is my personal opinion, and it may not be true for everybody. And Manish, you've asked several questions. I think many of these questions in terms of, I wish I can answer you how to grow and make a business in coaching. If you are, the only way that you can do that is, what do you call it? Mouth-to-mouth business, or somebody has to say that you've done well. Somebody has to give you a reference. You've got to develop that ability to be visible and be credible at the same time. So it's not about your being, Marshall is not an ICF certified coach. Another advisor on our board, Peter Hawkins, is not an ICF certified coach. They are some of the best coaches in the world. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have an ACC or a PCC, but the fact is they help, because they help structure that learning. And you start learning what is relevant in terms of becoming a coach. But I'll put it this way. We firmly believe that all coaching will have to start with self-coaching. And that is where the ontological, somatic coaching, sensory awareness coaching, etc. help. The reasons are two. One, that we all have baggages. We have our blind spots. We have our limiting beliefs. And carrying all of them, and I supervise coaching of several MCCs. I have done that for quite some time. And I find they all carry horrendous amount of baggages. And then it's hypocritical to go and coach somebody and saying, I can remove your baggage, your limiting beliefs. I can reframe you. When I haven't gotten over my own goddamn baggages, at least I should be aware of them. These people are not even aware most of the time. So, and that doesn't work. People can make out whether you're bluffing or whether you are authentic very, very quickly. Far more often than you think it can be. So the first thing that we do, and very simple analogy, that why don't you learn to fish instead of buying fish? So go and learn self-coaching. And the ontological, somatic, these kind of approaches with some spiritual intelligence is probably the best way to do that. And once you do that, and once you are able to heal yourself, once you're able to get rid of your own traumas, once you're aware of your blind spots, then you would be able to coach anybody much, much better. I'm not saying I've got rid of all my problems, but at least when I have some problem, I'm aware of it. And I start working on it and get rid of it, whether I meditate, or do some energy exercises, somatic awareness coaching of myself, or journal, whatever it is, some method or other. At the end of it, every day, by the end of the day, before I go to sleep, I do that. And if you just practice that, that'll make you a much better coach. So yes, the ACC and PCC and all these things help. But to know more about exactly what it is, Manish, I think you can just mail support at Coacharya, or Dreyvan will put his mail ID here. You can contact him. He will be able to.
Ram, there's a question around will 3 days suffice for a deeper understanding of.
No, there was an earlier question. Manish had asked, what thing is coaching for me? I wish to learn about spirituality, blah, blah, blah. Comparison between Coacharya and Master My Life, etc., ACC, PCC. That's up there somewhere. So that's much more detailed. That's not something that we are planning to cover. That may be much better if you engage with them one-on-one. Okay. Let me just finish this before. Unconditional positive regard with coaching a murderer, expanded ethical relativism. I don't know. Anyway, I again, Sai, I'm sorry. I'm not being sarcastic, but I don't understand really what ethical relativism is. I understand Buddha's principle of being relative and so on. Maybe it's the same thing. But point is this. I'm a spiritual healer, or I used to be. I don't practice spiritual healing in that sense, whether it is Reiki or pranic healing, multiple other things, various forms. One of the things, like what Dreyvan said, was before I was ordained as a healer by whoever the person who taught me, and in Reiki, it was a person who was actually coming from the lineage of Uzui. His granddaughter taught this guy who taught me. The thing that I had to say was, and go inside myself, reflect, somebody who has done the maximum amount of harm that I think was possible, if that person comes to me for healing, would I be willing to heal that person? And there's no relativism or anything there. It is just that unconditional positive regard. Am I willing to consider this person as energy and move forward with that? So I guess that is what Dreyvan was trying to point out by what this is, what unconditional positive regard is. We will go into much deeper things when we run the program. Jung read a group, he talks about relation, healed. Yeah. Yeah, I love Jung. In fact, for those of you who may not be aware, Jung came to India for a short period of time, but he studied about chakras. And he wrote a book called Kundalini, The Psychology of Yoga. It's a series of lectures that he gave, and they have been published. I think it was edited by an Indian person, published by Princeton or somebody. If you get a chance, read that. I've read a lot on chakras. I practice chakra energization a lot. And I'm amazed at the depth, conceptual depth, with which Jung was able to address this without knowing about Sanskrit, without having spent a lifetime learning it or whatever it is. So the whole concept of collective unconscious, as another phenomenally powerful person, Dreyvan knows him. He taught him Gestalt and he taught me NLP. Dick McHugh, Reverend Father Dick McHugh, Society of Jesus. He may be, I'm not sure, he's still alive. And when I asked him, I said, how do you relate Jung to spirituality? He said, what Jung calls a collective unconscious is the same as a collective conscious that the Hindu religions call Brahman. He's absolutely correct. It's just a question of semantics. Yeah, okay, so let's move on. Yeah, anything else, Dreyvan? We have another about 15 minutes left. Is there any other questions? Yeah, but Supana, I completely agree with what you're saying. Jung, please, if you want to be a coach, read something of Jung, understand Jung, especially collective unconscious, the archetypes, the symbols, the shadow, the ego, and the self, and so on and so forth. Those concepts are very, very similar to what the Upanishads say, and a lot of it is spiritual intelligence. Yeah, over to you, Drew. Or you have questions?
No, I would continue to ask you about spiritual intelligence, because you mentioned in the first time when you spoke that today the world and the way it's progressing, there's so much of loneliness, there's so much of depression, there's so much of feeling left out and all of that. It clearly indicates that spiritual intelligence has a huge role to play in the way coaching is shaping out as a profession to address all of that. And so how do you see the role of spiritual intelligence evolving in the coaching profession over the next few years? What trends should coaches be aware of?
Okay, yeah, it's a great question. First, I think, who was that? Somebody asked a question just now. Sai Krishna Rao. Yeah, Sai, I don't find it too difficult today. We have a number of people who, corporate leaders who come to our programs. And they are not different animals, okay? And in fact, my own personal experience, having spent about 8 years in a spiritual quest, where I found at the end of 8 years that the guy who was person who I thought was next to God was a complete fake and a crook. I find the whole space of spirituality and so on, these gurus and so on, is far more inauthentic and fake than in the corporate world, where people are very clear, okay, I'm here to make money. So what's wrong with making money? There's nothing wrong in making money. There's nothing wrong in being an influencer, powerful. The question is, you need to realize that that's not the end of everything, and there is something more. If you have all that money, all that power, if you're not healthy, is that going to work for you? Or if you don't have a relationship, is it going to work for you? And if you're so focused upon yourself that you forget everybody else and the whole concept of service, is that going to work for you? Are you going to be joyful? And which is where people lose the plot and they are confused and they are discontent. And we work with them in terms of trying to find a purpose where, in addition to wealth and power, you also bring in these other aspects of how can you build in health, relationships, service, learning, and various other kind of things, and the concept of spirituality, spiritual intelligence. And I think that's going to be the future. And strangely, I think AI is going to help in that. I have experimented with a lot with various forms of AI, from the latest Claude to the chatbot 4 point whatever, to whatever the much more inadequate, the Bings and the Geminis of this world. And I have created, when I say I, the AI is created with a few prompts, mastery level conversations, which if they are submitted to ICF, of course, ICF requires a recording, but let's say argument wise, if you submit it to thing, it'll pass. I'm an MCC assessor at ICF. That quality is so good. So if you are looking, and this is not just, believe you me, this is not just cognitive transactional coaching. At MCC level, you have to be really addressing emotional issues. You really have to go into the mindset of the client. You have to establish value systems. You have to reframe limiting beliefs and stuff like that. You have to go into the ontological somatic. So in the prompt, I'll put in there, look, this is ontology, this is somatic, this is spiritual intelligence. So can you incorporate all that into the ICF competencies? And it'll produce you something which is amazing. So if you want to survive in that space, where anybody can go to AI and say, hey, I have this problem, I've had this trauma, and so please tell me how to do it. You will, in the next couple of years, you will have, without knowing anything about, okay, AI doesn't emote, AI does not spiritual. It'll answer your questions. So if you want to survive and you want to grow and be in that field, then you need to be better than the AI. And there you really have to the real life experience, real-time experience of how do I connect to people in energy? How do I practice somatic awareness coaching? AI can talk about it cognitively. So can AI sit in front of Dreyvan and say, hey, Dreyvan, you tell me that you are frustrated. Can you just close your eyes for a moment and tell me where that frustration lies in your body? And I'll do that demo. Somebody said we would love to have that next week. But believe you me, for you, the price is that unless I have at least about 20 odd questions, which I think are reasonably intelligent to be answered, we will not have the next session, because it's pointless coming and churning the same pool. If there are sufficient interest, if there are sufficient number of questions, which I address to support at Coacharya, and I'm very, very happy to come back here and answer those questions along with Dreyvan. But to answer Dreyvan's question in a slightly different way, a few minutes, look at it this way. Evolution from a Darwinian principle and evolution from Maslow's. From the Darwinian principle, we know that up to the stage of reptiles, there is only the cerebellum. There is not even a limbic brain, if you understand the triune theory of Maxwell. And when the birds and the mammals came up, they developed the limbic brain. The difference between the limbic brain and cerebellum, which is the instinctual brain, very crudely put is this: reptiles eat their young, birds and mammals don't. They have a certain degree of nurturing, that motherly instinct. They have that emotional intelligence. If somebody says that birds, mammals, whether cats, dogs, or whatever, they don't have emotions, I think they have no brains at all. They have. Anybody who's had a pet, you would know that. They come to you when they know that you need healing. They will come and sit by your side. Everyone who's had a pet would know that. Like people like Andrew, of course, will know far more because they work with equine coaching and stuff. And then when you went into the primates, before you went to the Homo erectus and so on and so forth, Homo sapiens, the frontal part of the brain developed. And then in the human beings, as we evolve, the prefrontal cortex with all the intuitive abilities. So really, if you look at it this way, you had an instinct, which was there with the reptiles and so on, any creature. Then you had intelligence, emotional intelligence, and then you had a cognitive intelligence. But still, what holds us all together is really that very, very powerful inside somatic energy. Many people, many of people who teach chakras, they talk about the 7 chakras starting from Muladhara, which is the root center, going up to the Sahasrara. But actually, many people don't know that there are many chakras below that. And so the animals which are not evolved, their highest level, as in the human beings, the Sahasrara, crown center, it stops at the Muladhara. And for the humans, it starts from there and moves up. And the Chinese traditional medicine and Tai Chi and so on, the stomach is the holder of chi, energy. And many of it are true. There are multiple ways how you can interpret this energy. So if you look at it from there, there is one aspect of the physicality of the somatic aspect of it coming up. And the other is, if you look at it from a Maslow's perspective, just like those lower level animals are, up to the point when they developed even the emotional brains, you are at the survival level, the lowest level of Maslow. As a hunter-gatherer or whatever, or even before that, that is all that mattered to you. Not really, but let's say for a moment. And that's what probably those who are purely with the cerebellum, without any limbic brain, etc., had. And then when you have the limbic brain, you come into that space, or the second space of safety, and a little bit of that emotional intelligence. The amygdala starts acting. You want to get into tribes. You have a sense of belonging, collectivism, all that kind of stuff. So some of those things about emotional intelligence, empathy, and so on and so forth. And from there, you come into the level of emotional intelligence in terms of love, compassion, all that kind of stuff. And then you come into what Maslow calls a cognitive intelligence. It doesn't mean the transactional cognitive intelligence. It is about the understanding of where those emotions come from. It is about the understanding of what drives those energies. And that is in terms of what we feel about validation, invalidation, in terms of comparison with other people. The ability to understand that we are unique, we have our own strengths. So then you come into the fourth level. And finally, you come to the self-actualization, the fifth level, where you go even beyond that. You start disengaging. You are no longer in greed. You are no longer in selfishness. You become selfless and you start looking at other people as a means to your happiness. So that is how the spiritual intelligence moves on. The unfortunate part of it is this. Many of us, most of us who are here, I just have about a couple of minutes, at the time of birth, we are already at the third level because we are cared for, we are secure, we are safe, somebody is nurturing us and so on. We are already knocking at, from kindergarten level, at the cognitive intelligence of the fourth level. We are trying to prove ourselves to be better than that. And some people get stuck like the Trump. He's still behaving like a 10-year-old, hasn't grown up. Now, in order for you to move from there to self-actualization, there is only one way. Forget about yourself. Start caring for others. So in a very, very simple way, the only way spiritual intelligence works and the only way that you can be joyful is by caring for others before you care for yourself. May seem tough, but if you really love yourself and if you are full of self-esteem, then you would first care for the other before you start doing something for yourself. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Sure. I think that kind of also should explain, I think Sai Krishna Rao is asking that today's world is about performance coaching and where does spiritual coaching fit inside of organizations? And what you just shared is simply the answer to that, because even organizations need to care about the planet and about, society and about, after all, they're serving the rest of the, civilization. So it just fits in very beautifully there.
Yeah, we are already there, Dreyvan, unfortunately. So let's do this. Any of you who really want to continue this conversation, send us your questions and send us what you would like to talk about. And we will certainly hold another session continuing on this and answer some of these questions more in detail. Okay.
Sure.
Thanks, Mom. Thanks,
so, this is just an announcement that in case anybody who's sitting on the fence wants to talk to us about the course, I'm willing to take on that conversation. You can approach Coacharya, they can connect you with me, and whatever doubts you have about the format, like I see questions about, can we do it in three days? It's not just a 3 days program, it's I think 3 months after that, where we have virtual sessions coming up, 5 virtual sessions of 2 to 3 hours each. So it's a much longer format than what you're thinking. 3 days is just the face-to-face contact. It continues with virtual contact too. So you can reach out and we can have conversations.
Why don't you put on your email ID there, Dreyvan, please? Satyam, you asked a question. To be very honest, I think one-on-one coaching as it exists today will be dead. All coaching will be systemic in the sense that you need to address groups, whether it's families or teams, and as a part of it, you will be addressing the individuals. There's enough evidence to show that just by coaching somebody individually, how much you may feel the person is transformed, unless the people around them are addressed with it in a stakeholder way, it doesn't really work. There's no trickle down. And I've seen it in experience, and many other people have actually proved it. So eventually, which is why we keep talking about unendingly systemic coaching. And one of the major attractions of systemic coaching is that once you start practicing systemic coaching, which includes individual coaching, by the way, and it's in groups, it also becomes spiritual coaching. And if we have the next call, I can explain the connection between what I see as a systemic and spiritual coaching as well. So Dreyvan will put his email ID somewhere.
I have already put mine.
Yeah. It's
to the question
Dreyvan at Coacharya.com. Yeah. Dreyvan at Coacharya.com. So get in touch with him for the details. Those of you who are in India, who are in Bangalore, who might be later, yeah, possibly. Dreyvan runs virtual courses as well around Ontology. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, what we cover in the F2 cannot be covered for multiple reasons. The intensity of the meditation sessions or some of the somatic awareness sessions, etc., are far better done. Yeah, surely it can be done, but it's going to be more difficult. Okay. Yeah, but a lot of the content can be covered in virtual sessions as well, and which is what Dreyvan has been doing. Okay. Guys, thanks a lot. We've gone beyond the time. We don't want to hold up many of you. Okay, but we are certainly here to come back again in a month's time. Sylvester, who's managed this program, he will arrange it probably in the second week. I don't know which particular day it is, the second Wednesday of August. At the same time, 7:30 to 8:30, we could quite possibly meet. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. All the best. Have a great day, night, whatever for you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, Dreyvan. Thanks, Sylvester.
Thanks.